after their 2008 pilot program, of course, so this would be a second pilot program that were launched as a pilot. And the company's already indicated that if it were launched as a pilot, the costs would be the same as if it were launched as a full-scale program. The BCP has as its primary concerns the concerns that we indicated first and foremost in our reply comments of January 30th, 2015, which is there is a major fire issue that's unresolved with these census Gen 3 meters, which number over 1 million in the state of Nevada, and which Anjanette Damon's article, which we include as attachment 1, indicate are the foremost of the 12 types of meter that NV Energy uses. So for that reason alone, we think that that this program should not go forward. One of the points that was made is that there is a co-op just over the hill from Las Vegas that has a prepay program. We've checked that prepay program, and that program does not use census meters. It uses a different variety of meter. As far as the benefits that are supposed to occur because of any prepaid program, it doesn't appear that for non-participating people, or participating for that matter, there would be any benefit. There would be a $21 million cost, which that cost would be a cost that could potentially be borne by the non-participating ratepayers. Company representatives indicated that regulatory asset treatment would be sought with respect to the costs. We don't think that the ratepayers that don't participate in this program should have to bear that risk, and it would be unfair to do so. We also believe that the company is incredibly, that their thought that they'll get 10% participation within 3 years is very rosy, and that the N-Power program in Arizona didn't achieve anywhere near that kind of participation. So I think that's an important point. In the docket that was referenced by NV Energy regarding staff's investigation into the smart meters.
Talk to you.
The smart meters, we understand that there is now being sought an underwriter's laboratory investigation of certain smart meters, and its staff's asked for that. And at this point, we'd like to introduce that letter into the record in this docket, or take administrative notice of it at this point. And I think we have copies in the north and in the south.
Sure, I don't, we're in a non-contested proceeding. This is an investigation, so I don't intend to mark exhibits. I don't think there's any need to take administrative notice either, but I am aware of that letter, and I am aware of that docket, and I had intended to ask a brief question of staff when we did get to staff on that docket.
Oh, okay, very good. Just so that everyone's aware of that, and certainly the extent to which since smart meters will be investigated, that's something that at this point the BCP, we believe that it's important to know what the parameters are of the UL Underwriters Laboratories investigation of the meters and their testing of the meters, and also important as well that there be a passage of time factor as well as the testing of the meters before we even begin to think about any potential for a program. And at this point, we believe that there's already been a pilot program and as indicated in attachment 7 in our our reply comments, Arizona Public Service has just come to an end in their pilot program where they indicate, and I'll use their words with respect to their conclusions for their pilot program. They indicated slide 8, do not expand further until operational billing and metering issues are addressed. That's the conclusion that Arizona Public Service came to with respect to their program. So that there is, certainly with respect to programs of the scale that NV Energy is proposing, I think there's been, with a utility of a similar scale, questions as to its workability. Let's see, at this point, I'd like to have marked a slide that Mr. Morton prepared, which shows the penetration of the Empower program. And if we could have that distributed, please.
Sure. Again, we can distribute that here, and I would ask that Mr. Stuff, you file that in the docket. I'm not going to mark exhibits today with the non-contested proceeding.
Okay, we'll go ahead and file that then. And at this point, I'd like to have Mr. Morton explain the significance of our presentation as to the penetration.
Right, Mr. Morton.
For the record, Patrick Morton, economist, BCP. I specifically looked at the business case and sensitivities regarding 2 areas which I think are very critical to the business case. In fact, the business case hinges on participation and bad debt collection as the majority of the business case. I'll go ahead and start. Historically...
Mr. Morton, just one question before you do start.
Yes, sir.
Has BCP received the spreadsheet that Mr. Holmes referenced this morning that details the benefits of the program?
If it's the model that was included originally, yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's what I am addressing directly.
Okay.
Mr. Hearing Officer, this is Douglas Brooks. On the date we made our filing, we sent to both staff and BCP separately the executable spreadsheets.
Okay, all right, thank you.
One concern is the participation or the adoption level, and what I did here is provide the historical program, Empower, participants as a percent of residential customers, and at the bottom I provide some averages year over year. The company is expecting about 3.3% year after year, and if you look at these 10-year, 15-year, 5 years, or select 3 years, there's no way close to that participation level. I think it's very important the commission take notice and possibly look at a sensitivity as far as the participation level of somewhere between 1.2% to 1.6% on a yearly basis. What that would do is shift the payback period a little bit further, or the neutrality of the program. Second concern is the bad debt collection. In looking at this, I look at the Pareto ratio. Pareto was a mathematician that came up with an observation that basically said 80% of your business is generated by 20% of your customers. So in the context of this filing, 80% of your bad debt is generated by 20% of your customers. I looked at the bad debt and looked at it overall, and on a full customer basis, it's about $18.06. Now, when I look at it on the 80-20%, so 80% of the 13.9 million comes out to 11.1, and 20% of the customers are about 154K, and the debt related to those people are about $72.5. Now, in looking at the weighted average, I guess the business model assumes that all the bad debt customers are going to come in and they will pay approximately, or they will recover twice as much as a regular paying customer. But when I look at, I don't think you're going to get all those customers exactly. So again, I look at the 80-20% ratio, and 80% of the $18 is $14.45, and 20% of the $72 there is $14.45, so it gives me a $28.90. So when I divide $28.90 by 18.6, I get a 1.6 multiplier. The company in its business model uses a 2 multiplier. So I think it's optimistic as far as the participation and the bad debt collection that is associated with this. And that would significantly push out the payback or the revenue neutrality further out if you substituted these sensitivities into the model. And I highly recommend the commission do that. I think these are conservative numbers to use when looking at the model. Lastly, and one of my greatest concerns here, and why I came here to address this to the commission, is in looking at it, this program will generate significant amount of transactions on a monthly basis, and I provided an RS and an RM schedule there, and you can see there what's expected if based on average use. You will generate 81.2 transactions a year on the residential single family, and on the multiple residential multifamilies, it would generate 44.9 transactions. Now, the fees associated with this are significant. Shop and pay is about 74 cents of a dollar, and the kiosk fee paid by MPC is 70 cents. Now, what happens is all this will be recovered when they come in for a general rate case at a later point in time. So you won't see this until the next rate case. If you see the total there expected on a per person basis, you could expect $58.43 for the single family that's generated in fees, and $32.35 for the people residential multifamily. Now, what the company's done is charge $1.24 on a monthly basis to help offset some of these costs. So when I net out that amount, it becomes $43.55 that all these transactions would generate on an annual basis there. For the residential single family and residential multifamily would be $17.47. Now, the concern there is who's going to pay for that? Well, I don't want other ratepayers to provide a subsidy for this program that's later brought into a general rate case. And I prefer that it's upfront, and those that cost the transaction fees should pay for it up front. You can get an idea, just imagine, of the costs associated with that. In a worst case scenario, multiplying the $43.55 or the $17.47 there by the number of participants they're expecting. In this example I did for Nevada Power, The structure for Sierra is going to be a little bit different. I think the costs are slightly higher for that. But again, my point is, I think the participants should pay for these fees up front. It shouldn't be backdoor later on in general rate case. And the other 2 points is, I think you need a conservative participation rate and a conservative bad debt rate ratio to use in these models. And I highly recommend the commission look at that and use those in a sensitivity regarding the model. One last thing, I just want to make sure that all the benefits should be netted against the regulatory asset moving forward, so that way a better accounting of what's going on.
Mr. Stuff, I know that Mr. Traxler has a question right now, if that's all right, of Mr. Morton. Okay, Mr. Traxler.
Why wouldn't it be fair to assume that under the company's regulatory asset proposal, these fees would be captured in the regulatory asset, as opposed to being buried in cost of service in the next rate case?
I haven't seen the proposal from the company that states that, Mr. Traxler. It's been vague as to how all this recovery is being done. My point here is to make you aware of that and make sure that other payers don't subsidize this.
Let's see, I had another question, just a minute here, I lost my train of thought. Oh, with regard to the additional analysis you did, what you consider to be more reasonable assumptions, at what point did you reach revenue neutrality in your analysis? Not a reasonable assumption, according to what you consider reasonable assumptions.
It pushed it quite far out past the 2020 period.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch it.
Year 2020, as far as in looking at that around the year 2020 or more. So we feel there's risk to ratepayers doing this. You know, ideally a pilot program would be great. However, you're going to spend a lot of money on this infrastructure to get it started, and it becomes sunk cost after you do this pilot program. So, you know, ideally, if you didn't have all these costs, it'd be a great way to go.
Same question to the company with regard to the fees that he's addressed in this exhibit. Are these costs something the company anticipates including in the regulatory asset?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we talked earlier about the annual operating costs of the program. I spoke about the shop and pay fees, and these are those. These are included, these are totally embedded in our cost-benefit analysis and are offset by the benefits that are provided.
That's all the questions I have, thank you.
Right. Mr. Stuff.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to have Mr. Howard address some of the concerns that were expressed by Mr. Traxler with respect to the lack of deposits in other jurisdictions such as Massachusetts and New York, and other concerns with respect to other ways that the company would be able to achieve something similar to this, the goals of the prepayment program, but without running a prepayment program.
Okay.
Yes.
Hold on. Mr. Howard, hold on a second. This is Hearing Officer Lamolvo. Mr. Stuff, I don't, the scope of this proceeding is to examine the merits of a prepayment program. I don't want to get too far into discussing other suggestions on general deposit requirements. If we're going to talk about that generally, that's fine as related to this prepayment proposal. But if we're going to get into proposals on how to amend the current deposit process, I don't want to go there. We're not noticed for that. That's not within the scope of this proceeding. So with that understanding, Mr. Howard can proceed.
Thank you very much. John Howard, National Consumer Law Center on behalf of BCP in this proceeding. In light of your statement, the hearing officer's statement, I'll leave the alternate security deposit models go for now, but I will address the other portion of Mr. Stuff's question regarding the benefits of this program that the company has proposed accrue to participants, and the main point here is that the stream of information that has been proposed by the company can indeed be valuable to customers in managing their energy usage. And included in that stream of information would be daily or periodic information regarding consumption and expenditures. The critique that I would offer, however, is that those benefits, which may indeed help customers reduce usage in the short term and in the long term, can be provided to any customer with a smart meter, a cell phone, and internet access, particularly if they're willing to pay a premium associated with providing that service, and that those benefits needn't be tied to the continual threat of disconnection for non-payment in the event a customer is unable to come up with sufficient funds on a day-to-day basis to maintain a positive account balance. And if I may add, I was hoping to address some of the statements made by Mr. Holmes, I believe, with respect to notification and communications, and also to follow up on the questions of Mr. Trexler in this regard. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, sir. But anyway, the company has made very clear that it's impractical to mail notices to customers participating in this program. And by notices, I'm referring to notification of impending disconnection for non-payment or of low account balances. Well, secure notification of disconnection for non-payment is really a central tenet of the regulatory consumer protection structure, not only in Nevada, but in every state across the country. And I think it's interesting to note that the uptake for prepaid service programs in the United States is concentrated almost exclusively among cooperative utilities and municipal utilities that in most cases are not subject to these central and essential consumer protections. The company has noted its reliance on looking at the Empower program in developing its own program design and information generated through analysis and evaluation of the Empower program operated by Salt River Project, a municipal utility. Well, I believe in the company's filing, it refers to, certainly in its initial filing in the rate case, the Empower's in-home notification system as something of an anachronism, and that's been outdated through the development of modern-day electronic communications via cell phone and the internet. Well, from a consumer protection vantage point and from a health and safety vantage point, it would suggest that quote, anachronistic device, that in-home device which created audible signals and and in some cases, I think even flashing lights before power was to be disconnected was really an important component of the Empower program that wouldn't be present under the under the Nevada proposal. And just to finish up on this, and thank you for your indulgence here, but to finish up, I believe perhaps Mr. Holmes mentioned earlier today that communication requirements specified in regulation is based on snail mail, which has still exists, but basically on top of or underneath additional electronic communication modes that are available. Well, I think it's clear that as utility disconnection notification requirements came into play, and as regulations evolved over time, we saw telephone service, landline telephone service, extend to pretty much universal proportions. However, requirements to notify consumers of impending disconnection of the essential electric service they're receiving was not replaced by telephone. In many states, the telephone was allowed to supplement notice by mail prior to disconnection, but not to supplant that secure mailing that a customer doesn't have to pay for, and that occurs on a regular basis. So, in summary, the extent to which it is impractical to operate a prepaid service program and retain this secure notification system through the mail, I think, and would suggest renders modern-day prepaid service impractical itself and a degradation of the consumer protections around notification. So because of that central element of doing away with the secure notification by mail, I would argue that the proposal is deeply flawed and would respectfully suggest that the program proposal should be rejected at this time. And thank you again for the indulgence and opportunity to speak on for quite a while.
All right, thank you. Mr. Stuff.
Thank you. And I think lastly, Mr. Cooper voiced some statutory concerns with respect to the Consumer Bill of Rights and the 2001 legislative session and some health and safety concerns that were addressed during the 2001 legislative session in this state.
Thank you, hearing officer. Our comment starting at page 3 describes some of the legislative intent related to keeping vulnerable and low-income customers connected to the grid. And one wrinkle from that legislative history that may need to be made more clear is that the bills that were involved in creating the Universal Energy Code or the UEC Low Income Payment Program were really two different bills. AB 349, which was largely near the end of the session placed into AB 661. Both bills and the proponents of those bills talk about the importance of the health and safety issues in creating the UEC, but the bulk of that legislative history is in AB 349, where the mechanics were first laid out and described with the assistance of AARP representatives who helped Nevada basically create this first of its kind program in the country. What the proponents were trying to avoid was the telephone lifeline kind of bill where you would get a flat payment regardless of how low your income was below the poverty level. What the legislature drafted and created in 2001 was an entirely different bill, a different concept based on energy usage and based on how far you are below the poverty level. So perhaps without going too much deeper into the legislative history, the BCP would welcome the opportunity to supplement our comments with some of the attachments and written comments and PowerPoints of the legislators who created this bill in 2001, if that would be the Commission's preference, or I can continue on with some of the citations to the legislative history.
If you have any highlights that you want to summarize today, that's fine. I would also welcome a supplemental filing as well.
Okay, as I indicated, hearing officer, that the bulk of the legislative history was in AB 349, which the BCP would welcome that opportunity to supplement in writing. I would just point to the passage of AB 661, which was the final embodiment of this bill, which particularly got picked up in NAC Chapter 702. And in that passage, in that motion to basically pass the bill out of the committee on May 10th of 2001, Vice Chairman Buckley particularly noted in her motion that the Commission shall adopt regulations governing the issue of early terminations with the intent of the legislature, stating the Commission should find ways to ensure people in financial crisis shall not have their utilities terminated, particularly in extreme climatic conditions, and then adding that appropriate remedies such as liens and repayment plans, creating a system that she said would be equitable for everyone. So I'm quoting from pages 13 and 14 of the minutes of May 10th, 2001.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stuff.
Thank you. That's BCP's presentation at this time. And again, we believe that the fire safety issues are paramount before delving any deeper into this, but there certainly are other issues as well. And for those reasons, we would urge the rejection of the program, whether pilot or otherwise. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Trexler.
To NV Energy, can you refresh, make sure my memory is correct? I think I understood from your previous answer to some of my questions that under your current proposal, in the event that you receive evidence that the 48-hour notice didn't make it to the consumer, that would generate a mailing. Is that my memory correct on that?
Yes, that's correct.
And for BCP, with regard to your discussion on the company bill of rights, and the company's comments on page 37 indicate that in this jurisdiction, that since 1985, the provisions of the customer bill of rights have been amended and supplemented several times. My question is it BCP's position that under any form of prepayment plan that the customer bill of rights could not be adequately addressed in Nevada?
Well, that's a multiple part question. At this point, we haven't seen a draft of any proposal to alter the customer bill of rights, and until we would see one, we wouldn't know whether that would adequately address the existing consumer bill of rights. The existing consumer bill of rights has existed for over 20 years, so we see see that, so basically, we're talking about changing something that's existed for a long time. We really want to see something substituted that would have long-standing effect, and at this point, we're not seeing anything that we see that adequately addresses consumer concern.
So is it your position that the company's appendix FLX-7 is inadequate for purposes of adjusting the Bill of Rights to address this prepayment program?
At this point, yes.
Those are my only questions, thank you.
Mr. Hearing Officer, if appropriate, could I add to the response the company made to Mr. Dreckler's question regarding evidence of a customer not receiving notification?
Sure, briefly, and for the record, this is Mr. Howard speaking, correct?
Thank you very much. Very briefly, been involved with the Arizona Public Service pilot over the years, and I think the company has been very clear in answering questions in this regard, that they really have no way of knowing whether a text message has been received or not, and also whether if an email account is still open but hasn't been accessed, whether a message has gotten through or not. So obtaining evidence with respect to whether an electronically generated message was actually received or not in the APS experience is problematic. And thank you for the indulgence again.
All right, thank you.
That's all the questions I have, thank you.
All right. Mr. Stuff, in your presentation, you referred to $21.6 million in costs. Where did you get that figure from? I saw in the company's filing a reference to $21.6 million in net present value of benefits. I didn't see a cost figure.
Just a second here. I believe it was on staff's comments, page 2, lines 18 and 19, and it's referred to there as a 10-year net present value, and if that's not all costs, that would be my mistake.
Okay, and we'll get the staff on that, but I think that's the same figure or similar figure from the company's filing. You also referenced in your presentation that smart meters issues need to be resolved, as well as there needs to be a passage of time before a prepayment program would be considered. Passage of time, what are you referencing there? Is there a specific passage of time that you would think is reasonable?
We would think several years, probably at least 2 or 3 years, and we're referring to primarily our attachment 1 in our comments references Anjanette Damon's article, and also in our informal discussions with the company, they've indicated that consume meters occur within the 15 months of installation. The majority of them occur within 15 months of installation. So as time goes out, we'll be more public confidence in the ability of smart meters to work correctly. And also, if the underwriter's laboratories testing of this census meters occurs, and even if they're cleared, say, just hypothetically, we're still not gonna know whether the meters have been totally debugged with respect to all customer concerns. And actually, in light of the concerns that have occurred in other jurisdictions, and we've named 4 other jurisdictions in North America where there have been census concerns, we're not talking about a pie in the sky probability, we're talking about a pretty good probability that something like that might occur. That's why we think that there should be several years that should pass before a program like this is taken on, even as a hypothetical, because of the specific concerns with these particular census meters that you just don't see with other meter sets, that there's the potential of another boondoggle, particularly with these meters. So that's why we think that we really shouldn't consider this until we've seen that the public is confident with these meters or with replacement meters if these meters don't work out. So that's why we recommend there be more time.
Right, Mr. Trexler.
This is for BCP. The existing deposit requirement under the existing tariff for residential customers requires at least 1/3 of the deposit be made with up to an additional 60 days to pick up the remaining 2/3 of the deposit. Now, in situations where a customer simply doesn't have the 1/3 deposit, low-income people they can't come up with the 1/3 to start service. Why doesn't a program be presented like the one being presented in this investigation make sense for those folks?
Well, we agree generally with your concern that there should be a way for low-income people to get power if they're unable to pay the deposit, and that's why I brought up in our comments, and we mentioned low-income programs in Massachusetts and New York for folks to get on to and have power. Also in Nevada, I believe that you can pay a certain percentage down under existing law, so you don't have to. We've already got a Consumer Bill of Rights protection in there where you don't have to pay all of the deposit in one chunk. And I would defer to Mr. Cooper if he has any other observations on that.
Yes, thank you. This is Bob Cooper. On page 6 of our comments, we cited to NAC 704.341, paren 3, which talks about the process of going through an energy assistance application and the protections that can ensue as a result of that assistance. It's NAC 704.341, paren 3, where they describe arrearages and any deposit owed by the customer as creating a situation where the customer can enter into a payment plan, and the regulation specifically provides that this remedy should occur regardless of whether the customer has entered into any other prior agreements for deferred payments pursuant to this section. So a question is raised whether entering into a flex pay arrangement might be a prior agreement, and the extent to which this particular section of the administrative code may be at cross purposes with the flex pay scheme.
Are you suggesting that there is a current mechanism, though, to eliminate the need for some amount of upfront deposit requirement under existing tariff?
No, I'm just indicating that if the customer is low income and they've applied for energy assistance, that some of their requirements can be met through their assistance benefit.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Stuff, you also cited APS information regarding their pilot program. I think you were referring to attachment 7 to your comments, and I'm looking at slide 8 of the APS material. I think that's where you were reading from when you stated, do not expand further until operational billing and metering issues are addressed.
Yes, sir.
What is your understanding of the specific operational billing and metering issues that APS experienced?
I frankly do not have an understanding what those operational billing and metering issues are that APS needs to address. I mean, I could only, with respect to APS, I can only look at what we have in front of us here in Nevada and think that it must be very similar, but I frankly do not know what APS was facing. I know Mr. Howlett has got some degree of familiarity with Arizona in that respect, and I'm not sure if he would have some idea there.
Okay, before we go to Mr. Howlett, Mr. Stuff, do you know if APS makes use of the census meters that you have concerns with?
My understanding is no, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, Mr. Howlett, do you have any information?
With respect to the billing issues, my understanding is that in Arizona, as in the APS service territory, that is, as in other jurisdictions where there are smart meters, there are a variety of rate structures and billing arrangements that a customer can choose from, time-varying rate structures. The company has experienced some challenges in figuring out the billing on a time-specific basis, is my understanding. You'll see on slide 7 that the company indicates the need to accurately estimate final rate block on a daily basis has been a challenge for them. And I'm not an engineer, and actually I was somewhat baffled by this. My understanding of the technology is that sending signals, consumption signals on a frequent basis would have allowed for such billing, but APS has experienced difficulties with this time-varying rate overlay and the prepaid service billing.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lamoe, I guess I have a question on something that was triggered in the conversation, and I'm trying to get an understanding. Maybe the company can help me with that. I'm not sure how this is working as far as if you have to pay for franchise fees or other taxes that come out and are added to the bill. How is that being taken care of as far as, not that, in other words, is all your money going to energy, or is it being prorated in some form or fashion? And I was wondering if somebody could help me with that.
I'll start preliminarily. The franchise fee line item we collect on bills is not a tax on customers. It is a expense of providing service that the commission requires us to set forward as a line item. And any cost of service, whether it's the cost of natural gas or a cost of an employee or the franchise fee assessed by municipalities, are collected and will be collected from all customers. And it's expressed as a percentage of the total bill. So it would appear to me, and Mr. Holmes can correct me if I'm wrong, it's a very simple mathematical step to add that to the amount that a customer on flexible pay has incurred or will incur in our calculations of the balance going forward.
So Mr. Brooks, if franchise fee is $5 or whatever taxes are associated with this, and the total amount an individual has put down on a card is $100, so they're only getting $95 of energy.
They're getting 100% of energy, because some of the cost of the energy is franchise fees and other things.
Okay.
And that's no different from any customer.
Okay, thank you. That's the last of my questions for BCP. We have staff, and then one more time with the companies. Do we want to push through, or do we want to take a lunch break? I'm not sure how much material there is to cover, especially from the company.
The company is willing to push through, and our responsive material will be tailored accordingly.
Okay. Why don't we pick up with staff right now, see how far we get, and then perhaps take a brief break after staff's presentation, and then go with the company. Okay, Ms. Gross.
Yes, thank you. So I don't have a lot to add to staff's pre-filed reply comments from this docket. To summarize those comments, though, staff generally supports the program. We have some tweaks that we recommend, and then quite a few questions that we lay out in our reply comments. The big tweaks, if you will, that we put forth or propose is that this, instead of being a permanent program, be presented or provided as a pilot program, a 2-year pilot program. And that's really, I think, consistent with the way staff often views voluntary programs like this, and that we're conservative. We would like to see some benefits, proven benefits and value of the program, and we like that data in order to then address how the cost should be eventually flow into rates and such. So that's the big tweak that we're recommending. Some smaller ones are that we believe that on the customer service side of things, it would be great to have customers provided with a comparison of available options for deposit payments, arrearage payments, equal payment plans, vis-a-vis the FlexPay program as proposed. Also, we believe that it would be a great modification to the plan to require eligible customers that wish to voluntarily opt into the pilot program to sign and return a written acknowledgement that they understand the terms and conditions of the program. And that, I know from reviewing other parties' comments here, there may be some concern that there would be a language barrier for certain customers. And so I would just clarify that could also mean that there were translations available in Spanish or perhaps other languages if needed of not only the comparison of the available options, but also this written acknowledgement that I understand the terms and conditions and what's required of me to stay on this program. Then we have listed quite a few questions or clarifications that are of interest to us. And you'll note that right off the bat, number one for us was rate recovery question. And we, from today's workshop, understand that the company would be seeking regulatory asset treatment for any interim costs. And that's different than what staff understood from the general rate case proposal in docket number 14-05004. So, just as an initial reaction to that, I think recognizing that there's a distinction between booking something in a regulatory asset for potential recovery, different than it actually going into rates or potentially being disallowed to go into the rates by the commission eventually. That is an important question for staff, and I don't know that we would support a proposal or an expectation by the company that they would get full recovery if there's not some proven benefit or value. They need to have, I guess, some skin in the game, so to speak. Then, like I said, there's quite a few nits and gnats questions. One question, though, that has come up for us subsequent to filing our reply comments that I would put on the record today is that we wonder whether a FlexPay customer would be able to sign up for an automatic payment so that if their current account balance reached a certain level, say $20, that NV Energy would be able to automatically debit their account by some preset amount. And the reason why that's an important question to staff is if there was a capability to do that, you almost set up an equal payment plan or an additional protection in there. So that's a question that I'd add today beyond what we had included in our pre-filed reply comments. Then I don't want to preempt any questions, but I believe there was a question regarding whether the $2.6 million figure that staff included in its comments at page 2, lines 18 and 19, whether that was a cost only or whether that was a net of figure. And we took that from page 46 of the company's proposal. And my understanding is that $21.6 million is a net benefit or value over the 10-year cycle of the program as proposed. And we noted on page 3 at line 6 that we believe that net present value is likely overstated. And so that flows into, again, our proposal that this be modified to be a 2-year pilot program so that we can get the information and the data and see if it is overestimated and if so, by how much. And I don't know if there were any other questions, but I'll try to address them if so.
All right, thank you. Mr. Traxler.
The comments by the company and BCP indicate, with regard to the company, that the expectation for reaching revenue neutrality with regard to this program is best case scenario 3 years, more conservative 5 years, and BCP indicated that under their assumptions that it's 6 years plus. Given those dates, or the amount of time required to reach revenue neutrality, well, we know that there'll be no request for rate recovery, subsidization by other ratepayers. Do you think 2 years is enough to make any kind of a reasonable analysis of whether or not this program should go forward?
I may have to defer to Dr. Castleline, who is available in the Carson City hearing room, but I guess generally I'll try to take a stab at that question. And I believe 2 years would give us at least a good baseline, and then hopefully be able to scale it or extrapolate going forward. But certainly, if you make it a longer term, then we may have more definite timeframes for when that net neutrality would be reached. But from our perspective, I believe 2 years is a great, at least baseline approach that we could hopefully then extrapolate from. Dr. Castleline, do you have anything to add to that? No, I don't.
I don't think I have any other questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Grubbs, if the commission did favor a pilot program along the lines of what staff has proposed, does staff have any thoughts on cost recovery of the implementation costs of the the infrastructure necessary to implement that pilot program?
I really would need to circle back, especially with the Director of Regulatory Operations, to make a definitive proposal. But I guess generally speaking, and I think actually, Hearing Officer Moho, you brought up a great prior instance, precedence, if you will, for the commission suggesting that, like they did in the smart meter IRP docket, that they could recover the costs as long as they were outweighed by the benefit. So a proposal like that, that sort of precedent that we have somewhat kind of precedence for, sounds really good, at least initially. And again, this is different. This proposal is new to staff, and that it's not what we recall from the general rate case. So I would, again, I apologize, I don't have a definitive response for you, but at least upon initial blush, the similar construct of only being able to recover the costs if the benefits are proven is an important one we likely support.
Okay, thank you. And similar to the company, in requesting further information for them, there is going to be an opportunity for further information as you develop further thoughts on this. So we'll talk about that closer to the end of the workshop. And just as a point of confirmation, in docket number 14-09015, staff continues to pursue gathering of information regarding smart meters. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and staff did just yesterday file a letter with the commission confirming that staff has requested that certain smart meters by the companies be sent to the UL laboratories for testing. Is that correct?
That is my understanding as well, yes. I apologize, I am not assigned to that docket, but that is my understanding.
I understand, and I'm not going to get any further into that docket. I just wanted confirmation for today's record about those basic facts.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, I have nothing further for staff. Mr. Brooks, if it's all right, why don't we take another 10-minute break, and then we'll pick up with the company with any response that you want to make today, and then we'll discuss how we go forward from here.
Thank you.
All right, we're off the record.